Hey, welcome. Grab a seat anywhere. No, we don't have any menus. The only thing we have today is the freedom to express who you truly are. We call it Authenticity Radio. You'll like it, don't worry. Let me go grab the host. He's got the hospitality of a fat and jolly innkeeper. He's a good guy. Slade-suiter.
And thank you for joining us on the morning edition on Authenticity Radio. This is Slade-suiter. Today on Authenticity Radio, we have the bells in the background, and there's good reason. Claire-Louise Osorio, who is the Forever Phoenix blogger, talks about life issues. Now, I had the wonderful gift of being able to meet Claire when I was up in the Glastonbury Peace Initiative in the Healing Water Sanctuary. This is where I met Claire. And after I heard how she addresses herself to this world, I just knew that we had to have Claire on the morning edition. So Claire-Louise, welcome. Welcome to Authenticity Radio.
Thank you very much for welcoming me. It's a pleasure to be here talking with you.
Well, this is kind of like coming home, isn't it?
Absolutely. When we first met and started talking, that's very much how it felt. It was very comfortable and easy, so it is like that.
Okay, well, here we go. I hear the bells in the background. Where are you right now?
So I'm sitting in Christchurch, which is a small town in Dorset, about half an hour from Bournemouth, and the Priory Church is basically ringing out its bells as it does every Sunday morning. So that's what you can hear in the background.
Oh, that's fabulous. I love it. So can you tell us about Forever Phoenix, how it came about?
Yeah, it was very unplanned, like so many things in my life and like some of the greatest blessings in my life. I didn't really sit down and intend to do it. I've been writing since I was a young girl. It's my way of showing up in the world. It's almost like writing. I find my authentic self and I find a way of sharing that with others. So I think a friend of mine suggested, why don't you think about having a blog instead of just writing for yourself? That way you can share it with others more. And I came up with the name Forever Phoenix just because that image has always resonated with me, the idea of this mythical bird that through the flames of adversity is reborn into a new and more authentic self. And I just felt like that's kind of been the theme of my life. I've had an unusual life and I've had quite a sort of dramatic life in some ways. It certainly hasn't been dull, but I've had quite a lot of adversity, as all of us do, but actually that adversity has really strengthened me and made me who I am today. So I love that idea of the phoenix that, from the ashes of all this difficulty and adversity is reborn into a new form. And that's kind of what I talk about on my blog in lots of different ways. So I talk about life experiences I've had, things I've read. Sometimes I just post poems on there. But I think what they're enabling me to do is really connect with that authentic part of myself and share it with others and hopefully inspire other people who have also gone through some challenging times, that actually out of life's greatest difficulties, sometimes the best and most enduring blessings can be born. So that's kind of me and what I'm trying to share on my blog.
Well, you're not trying. You are being very successful in doing so.
Thank you.
Okay, so Claire-Louise, let me tell you, or let me share with our listeners, rather, one of the things that Claire and I, we discussed offline is that oftentimes the adversity that we discover in life is often a better catalyst in helping us to get to the point where we become aware enough to know that it is time to stop fighting with oneself. And so that's kind of like the sub-theme that we want to discuss today is, what is that point we get to when we decide it's better not to fight with oneself?
I think that comes around when your life just really isn't working, when the mind the mind space you're in is just creating more of what you don't want. So you have to step away from that and say, right, this is not working. This is time to do this differently because it's creating more of what I don't want. And sometimes things have to break for something new to be born. And that's why I think, adversity is not per se a bad thing. It opens us, it breaks us open to let something new in if we just allow it to. So for me, I think actually some of the most difficult times of my life when things have really not been working and things have really been felt like they were sort of crumbling and falling apart around me is when I've really found my way, ironically enough.
And that message is very important today for so many people, of being able to find something new, that there is something available. It is not an end. As a matter of fact, it seems to be a beginning.
Absolutely.
And Eckhart Tolle, I was just listening to a work of his, and he says, you know what, it's actually that adversity just keeps us from becoming too comfortable and keeps us searching.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And sometimes I've kind of felt like, joking aside, I'm almost like on a fast track to enlightenment, especially when one disaster after another appears to be apparently occurring in my life. But I do realize when I am able to step back from it and not get caught up in the drama, I can actually see the opportunity that it is. Because when we're coasting along, just paying the bills and going through the motions of everyday life, there are a lot of distractions there. So we get comfortable, as you say, and we don't really even have the time to think about things. But it's when things really start to fall apart, we have to kind of stop and take check and say, right, what's really important in my life? Am I living the kind of life I really want to live in this moment? Because time is limited. We're not here forever. And sometimes those things falling apart make us really conscious of that and help us to make different and better choices, I think.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea of lives in a storytelling mode. And once we look at a life, we can see how it unfolds. And you're doing this in a very literal way with your blog.
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow, I just love it. Okay, so let's talk about this point of that many of us are getting to now, where we discover that we have been, in fact, fighting oneself, that we've been fighting our very own self. It's kind of like we're discovering we're kind of divided inside.
I can definitely relate to that. I think sometimes I felt that there's a war going on between my head and my heart, and finding a balance between the two is quite hard. I think as I've become more authentic, which I believe I'm doing through my writing, I have uncovered my heart and stepped a bit more out of my head, because I think my head is often where the confusion is, actually, as with most people.
Mm-hmm. So what would you suggest for your readers and for our listeners today on how to identify this voice, this divide in ourselves, and how to approach it in a way that is peaceful?
It's interesting you mentioned this, because I'm just reading the 16th chapter of the Tao Te Ching. It was the first thing I opened this morning, and I'm just going to read it, if that's okay.
Please do.
So it says, empty yourself of everything, let the mind be still. The 10,000 things rise and fall while the self watches their return. They grow and flourish and then return to the source. Returning to the source is stillness, which is the way of nature. The way of nature is unchanging. Knowing constancy is insight. Not knowing constancy leads to disaster. Knowing constancy, the mind is open. With an open mind, you will be open-hearted. Being open-hearted, you will act royally. Being royal, you will attain the divine. Being divine, you will be at one with the Tao. Being at one with the Tao is eternal. And though the body dies, the Tao will never pass away. I think in that verse is almost a key to what you're asking me. I think it's about finding a stillness within yourself from all the mind talk that goes on continually. It's returning to source. It's returning to yourself. And that's the way you reconnect with your heart and your authentic self, in my experience. So I love that verse from the Tao Te Ching. And every day, in fact, I try to read one of these verses, because I just find it's almost in a kind of serendipitous way. I always open it at a different place, and it just gives me what I need to hear for that day. Mm-hmm. So I would say the kind of key to reconnecting with ourselves and breaking out of that dichotomy between heart and mind is finding our stillness, finding our sort of inner quietude and just letting it come to us, not struggling so much. I think we battle so much with ourselves and we get stuck in our heads. So we need to find that place of stillness. Now, for me, I do that through my Buddhist chanting, through meditation. I do it through reading, so it's going to be different for every person. But I think we're surrounded by so much chaos and distraction every single day. It's so important to find that stillness however you decide to do it.
And Claire-Louise, what is constancy?
I think it's knowing what is right and true and being and continuing with it, not deviating from that path. So I think one of my struggles is that I have lots of good intentions and I think I have a lot of wisdom and self-insight, but I can't always put it into practice. Is that alignment between, actually living your values, living your authentic self, not being distracted, staying on the right path. That for me is constancy.
And it could also be constancy, is that knowledge of what you're referring to, but a knowledge that has to do more with the heart and experience rather than what we're talking about, the head or our ego.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, so it's kind of really tantalizing for our cute little brains, our egos, to get a hold of this and say, I have to make sense out of what constancy is, and really try to work it over and squeeze it. And as soon as we do that, we lose everything about what constancy is.
I think it's also a feeling. It's not just a thought. It's a feeling. It's a feeling of being grounded, a feeling of just letting things flow. It's just being in the flow of life, I think. It's like what you were saying about fighting yourself. It's when you stop fighting yourself, when you allow that you allow that connection with your heart and you're not in your head all the time.
Well, isn't that a beautiful image?
Absolutely.
The moment where we don't even draw a truce. We just come to an agreement to stop fighting ourselves and realizing that we need our entire self on this journey. And that also keeps us from becoming overly spiritual, doesn't it? What do you think of that?
I agree. I think because when you're approaching it from the mind, then the ego comes in and you want other people to listen to you and you want to be almost like a guru for other people, and it's not coming anymore from your authentic self. So I agree with that. I think it's definitely about reconnecting with the heart, all of this, and just allowing yourself to be open and not thinking that you have to have all the answers, just allowing it to come to you.
I love the word allowing. Because there's
kind of surrender, isn't it?
Yeah, surrender. Ooh, and so many of us think of surrender as a weak position.
No, I think surrender is the opposite. You have to have amazing strength because you have to trust in the process. So within surrender, there's a concept of trust, and you can't let go and surrender without that. And to be able to trust in your own process, you have to be strong.
Yeah, and then there seems to be a reconnecting with something that we already know, kind of like a relaxing back into our known self, something that we know. And the feeling that I get is when we're talking about this is, yeah, that feels right.
It's like stepping into a warm bath.
I love it.
Yeah, but it is. It's just a letting go and a relaxing and knowing that you're safe, that you're contained, that everything just is how it should be, and just giving up the struggle.
I guess that's the trick, isn't it? Allowing ourselves to be here, to show up in our life, because you know what? It is about living life, and it comes down to a choice.
It does come down to a choice. And I think a lot of people forget that there's a choice, but there is always a choice there.
Yeah, and the vulnerability, I tell you what, I feel so much. Okay, I'll share something with you. I don't know where I'm going to go with this, but I find myself very comfortable around people who are typically considered to be strange.